Well, well, well. Another upset in the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff, and this time Ohio State is on the other side. Last year, we remember, or last year, it was January 1st. So at the beginning of this year, technically, and it's 11:15 p.m. in the East, so it's not 2026 just yet in the Eastern time zone. So at the very beginning of 2025, we had the 8 seed Ohio State beating the 1 seed Oregon, and people will say actually that wasn't really an upset. Fair point, but you get the point. An 8 over a 1. Now we have a 10 seed over a 2. So in the bigger picture, what we've learned from the first 2 years of the college football playoff, and of course we have 3 more quarterfinals on New Year's Day, but like this seems pretty clear, right? First round, like 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, those are the mismatches, right? Because you get the teams at the bottom of the pile, the bottom of the deck, and they're playing road games. But as soon as you get into the quarters and you have teams with that played a first round game and kind of got the juices flowing, and Ohio State definitely looks stale in that first half. The layoff seemed to hurt. This is a thing in all the sports, right? Talk about it in the baseball playoffs. The team that sits around isn't fresh, and the team that's playing in the earlier round gets some momentum. Like, this is a thing in a lot of different sports. Ohio State definitely looked flat, and Miami looked sharp. Miami was definitely prepared, and obviously we're going to kick this around a lot. This is our main topic. If you want to talk about the Thursday quarterfinals coming up, by all means do so, but would like to get Miami Ohio State involvements. And it's New Year's Eve. We're celebrating the new year. I'm happy to go late into the night, but as you know, if you want the second hour, if you want the third hour, gonna need some super chats, right? $150 to get you a second hour here at the Voice of College Football. So this is the evolving reality of the playoff. That first round, that kind of falls flat, but then in the quarters, you get the dynamic where the team that wins a first round game builds some confidence, gains more understanding, is a little bit just sharper, more finely tuned, and the higher seed that sits around for a bit can be caught flat-footed. It's exactly what we saw tonight with Miami over Ohio State. There's our friend Jackson Johnson. Like, Jackson is always there. You can always count on Jackson Johnson, all right? I do, and I'm not regretting it one bit. I'm very grateful to have Jackson in our corner here at the Voice of College Football. But anyway, so that first round quarterfinal dynamic, that's really emerging. That's one part of the story. And again, welcome your calls, your comments on this game to help us pass the time. But until there's a call, I'm happy to just give my observations on what happened. So let's start with this. And if you've been watching the shows I've been doing, the fill-in shows I did over the past week, Christmas Eve, Christmas night, and also some of the recent Monday shows I've done with Mark Rogers, I was banging this drum a lot. And this drum is, why in blazes were the quarterbacks the Heisman Trophy winner, and of course we'll see what Fernando Mendoza does for Indiana against Alabama in the Rose Bowl, but Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt losing to Iowa in the ReliaQuest Bowl. I mean, Pavia had his moments, but not extremely consistent. And then Julian Sayin, he was a Heisman finalist. He was viewed as one of the 4 most outstanding players in college football this season. And I was out in front saying, joke, that's ridiculous. Can we all agree on that now? Can we all see that? And again, this is not to dump on Julian Sayin. Heisman conversations often feel like criticisms. They often feel like hater parades. But it's just a matter of saying, this guy's better than the other guy. And these are the top players in college football, and maybe this guy isn't one of them. Being like a top 50 player in college football, pretty damn good, okay? But Julian Sayin's not top 4. He's not top 10. And yet, in this weak year for quarterbacks in college football, a season when you didn't have great dominant quarterbacks, 3 quarterbacks were invited as finalists and one won it. And can we all begin to see how much of a joke that really was, and how the national conversation just seems to naturally gravitate toward the quarterbacks on top-seeded teams, the foremost national championship contenders? Can we see how much of a farce that is? Julian Sayin, he's a good player. He had a good season for Ohio State, but he was not ready for this. He was not up for this. He was deer in the headlights. The pick 6 was part of it, but also there's a guy, Ross Fulton, really good film study guy whom I follow on Twitter. He was showing how on the sack that Julian Sayin took before the pick 6, he had a crosser near the goal line open for a touchdown. And it's right in front of him. This is middle of the field between the hashes. And he either just didn't see it or just didn't have the guts to throw it. Julian Sayin, deer in the headlights for the first half of this game. Now, to his credit, he pulled it together in the second half, but it was too little too late. And all the sacks Julian Sayin took, there were, I'd say, 2 where he didn't really have a chance. He just got snowed in. But there were certainly 3 sacks on the night where, throw the ball away. Don't eat a 7-yard loss. I mean, and he might be young and he's still learning, and that's part of the progression, and we can all appreciate that. But this was a playoff game. He had a month to prepare, and he did not look prepared. And that was certainly part of the equation. So really, quarterbacks were not the best players in the sport this year. Ohio State's defensive line, Caleb Downs, you could even say Jeremiah Smith, all better players than Julian Sayin. And yet, Sayin got the Heisman finalist invitation. I think we can see just how ridiculous and way off the mark the Heisman discourse and the Heisman voting were this year. All right. I'm going to have more on the game if there's a lull in our conversation, but we do have people on the phones, so let's roll it. Dr. C, welcome to the
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Happy New Year. What do you have for us tonight?
This was my big concern. Having, 3 weeks off for these teams, 1 through 4, Ohio State. Like it or not, that's going to kill some of the momentum that you had with the season. That was my main concern, and I'm glad you brought that up. If you could, I know this was kind of like a vague question, but how much of an impact do you really feel that layoff had on them, percentage-wise? I mean, if you could narrow it down.
Yeah, so I mean, this is certainly one of the headline developments from this game, right? The buys and how much they hurt the team with the buy. I think we just need to go into the details on these things. First off, Julian Sayin, this was new for him. And, if Ohio State had Will Howard or just, another veteran quarterback who had kind of been through the battles a little bit more, would this be different? So it was a particular situation. And let's also take this time to mention that Carson Beck played a great game. He was ready for this, and his experience showed. He was calm, poised. He didn't force throws. He took off, ran for 7 or 8 yards, showed toughness, but he protected the ball. And so he has protected the ball in each of Miami's wins. He let the other quarterback implode and make the big mistake. It was Marcel Reed against Texas A&M. But to go back to this point about the bye and just how much of a harm it is for the team with the bye, Ohio State was in a particular spot with a young quarterback. And so it was up to Ryan Day to have the right plan. And so, the bye generically, just by itself, I think that more affected Ohio State up front, because Miami looked just tougher, sharper, was also reading the snap counts. That felt like the specific product of a bye. But where Ryan Day of Ohio State could have countered the rust effects of the bye was get Julian Sayin into a rhythm early, make the game easy for Julian Sayin. Younger quarterback. He's not a polished veteran who's figured it all out. Make the game easy for him. And it was noticeable. Miami made it easy for Carson Beck. Beck wasn't throwing the ball 15, 20, 25 yards down the field. It was all short throws, very manageable. Miami with an 8-minute touchdown drive in the first half, it didn't have one downfield pass. Everything was within 10 yards, within a phone booth. In many ways, that's the way Indiana likes to play with Mendoza as well. So I was really impressed with Cristobal's plan and offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson's plan, making the game easy for Carson Beck. Ryan Day didn't do the same for Julian Sayin. He was doing straight dropbacks, screen game. Hello, where were the screens? Where were the quick hitches? And ironically, a quickie got picked off for a touchdown. But like early in the game, Ryan Day was not making things easy for Julian Sayin. So the bye had some influence in terms of line play because Ohio State's offensive line looked really good coming out of halftime. But in the first half, they looked flat-footed, and that seemed to be the product of rust. But this is where coaching is supposed to show up. And, we're in the 12-team playoff. So, you have games in the middle of December, and you also have conference championship games, things that you didn't have 4 decades ago. I'm just old enough to remember, growing up in the 1980s, how you don't want to give Joe Paterno or Bobby Bowden a month to prepare, right? And we didn't talk about college football bowl games and postseason games then the way we do now. Part of it is because, players and teams are asked to play more games than they did back then. But even then, we didn't say, what's going to happen to Penn State with a month off? We would never talk about a Joe Paterno Penn State team in the 1980s that way. And Paterno and Bowden both, they were just the masters of bowl preparation with 1 month off. And so the bye is a factor, Dr. C. I'm not trying to minimize that. I mean, it really did have an impact, but young quarterback as opposed to a veteran quarterback, Carson Beck outplaying Julian Sayin by a wide margin. I don't think that is bye specific. I think that's just more of Miami had the more mature quarterback with a better plan. Ryan Day got outcoached by Cristobal and Shannon Dawson by a large margin in the first half. Now, Day, to his credit, made good halftime adjustments. The runs to the outside were getting swallowed up. So in the second half, the adjustment for Ohio State was the cutback up the middle. That was a clear-cut adjustment. So the angles and the stylings of the Ohio State offense were different, but it took Ohio State and Ryan Day a full half to really get up to speed, to change things. And, they were down 14-0. It was too little too late. Ohio State had one possession in the second half with a chance to take the lead, couldn't do it. Miami's defensive line, which has just been awesome in the playoff, rose up. So, if you want a percentage, I'd say the bye and the rust versus sharpness factor, that was maybe 1/3 of the pie. But I think Ryan Day not having a good plan and Julian Sayin showing his inexperience on this stage, that was the majority of the story. And Miami, being really, really sharp and dialed in on defense, being good enough to make Julian Sayin pay for his mistakes, for his lack of good decision-making. So the bye is certainly a large chunk of it, but it's mostly Cristobal out-coaching Day in the first half and Julian Sayin not being up to the moment.
Yeah, well said. And so now I know you mentioned Paterno and some of these other coaches with the time off. However, they were also playing teams that had the same amount of time off, correct?
That is true. That's a good point.
And I remember because I do remember when my one of my old bosses was a huge college football fan. I remember he saying that game was sloppy. I don't like this time off, So that's what I kept on thinking. But you brought a great point. Do you think that the expansion to 16, I think most of us believe is going to happen, is that going to be the cure for this?
That is a great insight, Dr. C. I mean, with 16, you get rid of buys. You just have everyone playing in the first round, and you have more inventory, and like you include, so Miami really nailed this down in terms of validating its inclusion in the playoff. But if you're Notre Dame, you're saying, well, that could have been us. And I'm not saying that Notre Dame deserved to be in over Miami. They didn't, because Miami won head-to-head. We should be honoring head-to-head results. But like, I do think that these lower seeds winning, like that is going to increase momentum for saying, well, hey, if a 10 seed can advance to the semis and an 8 seed can win it all, we should be inviting 16 teams to the playoff. And yeah, getting rid of buys, and so that means you're going from a 4-game first round to an 8-game first round. Man, ESPN is going to view that as very attractive. You're very good for its bottom line. You just you have more intrigue, and we talked about how the first round falls flat, especially the 5 versus 12 and the 6 versus 11 games. So, the 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, and probably 3 versus 14, they're probably going to be dogs with fleas. Those are probably not going to be good games, but you're getting more inventory in that first round. So like that's going to be the counterbalance to all of that. So I think tonight definitely does move us in the direction of 16 teams because when you see these mid-level seeds winning quarterfinal games, advancing to the semis, Ohio State last year as an 8, Miami this year as a 10, that's going to help the argument for 16, not hurt it.
Yeah, and I think the counter argument was, well, Ohio State had additional weeks off, and they were able to pick up more footage from Miami, right? So that was kind of like the trade, right? We're taking a look at an extra game, extra way we're seeing more of what you guys are going to bring, and the rest. But as we see now, the rest of teams are flat. But yeah. So hey, I know you got a lot of callers, but I called yesterday, and you're the perfect guy for this question. DC for USC. I think I'm with you with Pete B. I can't say his last name.
Kwiatkowski.
Yeah, being the guy. I think there's no one else. But what do you think? I do think that USC, the guy they really wanted, and I think he didn't come because I believe he just wanted a head coaching job and was brokenhearted that he wasn't the head coach at Wisconsin, and that's Jim Leonhard. Any chances he's the guy?
I wanted Jim Leonhard to be the guy after the 2023 Cotton Bowl, the game in which USC had a 45-30 lead with under 5 minutes left and blew it against Tulane.
Oh, I don't like thinking about that.
I thought Alex Grinch needed to be fired, and I thought Jim Leonhard was the right replacement. But it seems, from everything I know, that Jim Leonhard was never particularly interested in USC, that he's a Midwest guy.
Oh, wow.
I think that would be the right move for USC to make. So, even if a guy, you think he's going to turn you down, but you like him and you're impressed with his credentials, you should definitely go for him. Like, you should place the phone call. It doesn't hurt to place that phone call to make that run. So USC can certainly make a run at that. So, if Pete Kwiatkowski turns down the job, where does USC go? And we talked about this on the USC show last night here at the Voice of College Football. Ryan Walters, the defensive coordinator at Washington, he might want to stay with Jedd Fisch. That very strong odds that he stays at Washington because Washington has recruited well. Jedd Fisch seems to be developing momentum. They have Damon Williams comes back at quarterback next season, so there's continuity there. There's some upside. There is a sense that Washington is in position to make a real run next season. So Ryan Walters probably stays, but USC should certainly If Kwiatkowski turns him down, Ryan Walters is probably the second phone call. And then after that, then it could get really dicey for USC. But like there should be a lot of interest in that job. And some people will say, well, Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat. So if you go to USC and you don't do the job, you're going to be looking for another job. But hey, that's part of the point, right? If you can save Lincoln Riley's tenure, wow, that would be a real bullet point on your resume. So like I think USC should be able to attract high-end talent. You also have the top-ranked 2026 recruiting class coming in, plenty of resources. So it is an attractive opening. Even if you think Lincoln Riley should be fired, as I do, it's still a very attractive opening, and USC should be able to get top-end candidates. But it's really crucial for the Trojans to land the plane and get their man.
Absolutely, it's a must. And I think after those two candidates being Pete and Ryan, the last name that I hear a lot, if we can't get those, is potentially Nua, who of course is internal. Supposedly, if Hill
Sean Nua is not on the staff.
No,
he was with
coach, right?
Well, Eric Henderson took over that spot, unless he's an analyst.
Okay.
I don't. Hold on here.
Someone had told me that Nua was part of the staff.
Okay.
Well, Nua supposedly that if Hill leaves BYU, Nua would be the top candidate for BYU.
Well, that is a definite possibility.
You like him at all?
So he is still defensive line coach. Like I didn't hear anything about him this season. So that's a big own goal for me. That's a howler. That's a massive mistake for me. But like he's been really in the background while Eric Henderson really takes over as defensive line coach. So whether he was in like a consultant role or an analyst role, he is on the staff. So that's a definite possibility there.
Gotcha. Hey, Matt, I won't take any more of your time. Thank you so much. Happy New Year. And go Trojans.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. I'll try to do better, folks, than that.
Never.
And now we have Trey. Trey, welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hi, welcome back, Matt. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you. What do you have for us tonight?
I think we all should apologize to Miami tonight. We should all apologize. Because I think
apologies only if you thought they didn't belong in the playoff. But if you thought they belonged in the playoff, certainly no need to apologize.
Let's be honest. Most of us all thought that the Buckeyes would stomp the crap out of them Miami. We all thought that at one point. I did.
I was agnostic in terms of the 9.5. I did think Ohio State would win, but I didn't think that Ohio State's offense was going to do a whole lot against Miami. I just thought that Ohio State's defense was going to be even better, but didn't happen. And again, Carson Beck with a very mature game, with a very calm, steady performance. And Miami scored 24. But 7 points came on a pick six. So Miami's offense scored a modest 17, but that is more than any other opponent scored against Ohio State's defense all season long. And part of the calculus in this game, part of the wisdom of this game is that, this was a game in which the quarterbacks needed to let their defense win, right? Let your defense go out and win this game. Don't make the mistake. Don't try to be the hero. Just make the routine plays and let your defense do the job. And Carson Beck set up his defense, I should say, to win this game. And Julian Sayin most definitely did not, with the pick six and just with some other really bad decisions. So, for people who thought this would be a wipeout, they can apologize to Miami. But let's also say this. I've been a doubter of Mario Cristobal. The game management, the baffling decisions, late game flops, and stubbing your toe against Louisville at home. He's been through it and he's deserved the criticism on various occasions. But he really answered the bell tonight. He really answered the bell. He's getting through to his players. and he's developing a consistency with that physicality and that line play that we all know he values that more than anything else. And that he's, so the great coaches, they get their team to play the right way, the way they want regularly. And Miami has just imposed its desired template on the Texas A&M and Ohio State offenses. So tip the cap to Mario Cristobal. He has answered myself and the other critics. You got to give him a ample amount of credit.
Yeah, he finally did. A lot of people wanted Manny Diaz back. I mean, to be honest, I liked him better than Mario at a point, but I'm glad he did prove him wrong. This is huge. This can buy him a couple more years. Imagine if he gets all the way to the championship. He will never get fired for the next couple.
Yeah, we're not talking about any hot seat at all. Period.
Yeah,
like this establishes Mario Cristobal for the long run
a while
at Miami.
For a whole while.
And that the NIL investments that Miami made, like the program is now in a position to re-up and just reinforce, getting the elite players, the big dogs up front, also at linebacker, Ruben Bain. He was the best player on the field tonight. You could say Fletcher, but he fumbled. So Ruben Bain was the best player on the field, and that reinforced. That's a good, it's a good time to reinforce the Heisman argument. Like Ruben Bain, obviously a better player than Julian Sayin, Fernando Mendoza, and Diego Pavia.
Yes.
Maybe we could argue Jeremiah Love, but he was certainly. Ruben Bain is a better player than the three quarterbacks who were invited to New York for the Heisman ceremony. He was a game wrecker tonight against Ohio State.
They left out Jacob Rodriguez. That was absurd.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's be honest here. What I've seen throughout Rome, the first snap all the way to the last snap, Miami had full control. Even when it was very close at a time, it looked like Miami never lost control of that whole game. It looked like Ohio State was coming right back from behind. They were trying to catch up, and Julian Sayin was like deer in headlights. He didn't know where to go. He was getting rushed. They looked like the O-line couldn't block nobody. Every time he got to him, either he got hit on the ground or he's been rushed out of the pocket and throwing it away, misfiring, turnovers. I don't know what that was at the end. He threw it out. He way overshot him right in the middle of the field and ended the game. He did not look like a Heisman candidate at all. And I didn't think he was in the beginning of the year, middle of the year, or end of the year. He never looked like that guy. So I understand that I thought he was not that great. I thought he was overrated. He was too hyped. I didn't see enough of Julian Sayin really do nothing. It's usually his defense and the good receivers doing all the work for him. And when it's all on him, to pull the team through, because let's be honest here, what we've seen, Ohio State never got drugged out, and they never was an underdog in this game. They were an underdog in this game. They never had that issue. Maybe versus Indiana, but that was a very even matchup in a way because they were so good together. They were holding each other in check most of the game. But in this game, it looked like they were a complete underdog. They have totally unperformed, and it's what happens when you're not ready to come to play versus Miami. You're going to get exposed. I think it exposed them a little bit. Maybe their defense is not as good as Miami's now because Miami just shot the gaps on them. They ran right through them, and Carson Beck didn't have to do anything. And I said this last week to Mark. I thought they would be in big trouble because they needed Carson Beck to do something more than 10 passes or 100-something yards. Instead, he did the same thing he did last game, and they ran it down their throat, and there's nothing they could do about it. They didn't have no answer from the beginning to the end. And Miami's running backs, they're freaking great. They are a complete problem to deal with for Georgia. If I was Georgia, I'll be looking at this after I think they beat the crap out of Ole Miss, so I don't think there's no match. But I would look at this and pay attention because this could be a running back duel instead of quarterbacks.
Yeah, so with Georgia, we just need to let that Sugar Bowl happen first. But like Miami is delivering a consistent standard. And let's also say this about Miami, that, last season, Ohio State, after the Michigan loss, like that team was pissed. That team was angry. That team had a chip on its shoulder, and it carried it right through the playoff. So Miami, with all that debate, all that controversy, and the ACC being weak, Miami had a chip on its shoulder. And it's one thing to be mad; it's another thing to take that anger, take that frustration, and channel it into good performance. So Miami is kind of taking a page from the Ohio State playbook a year ago, ironically enough, beating Ohio State tonight, but turning a chip on its shoulder into some really physical, focused football. The Hurricanes can legitimately go all the way, given how well they are playing on defense, and given that their Carson Beck is playing mistake-free football. You said Carson Beck didn't have to do anything. I'd amend that a little bit. He didn't have to do too much, and like that is part of, I think, the mindset that Mario Cristobal and his staff have very effectively communicated to Carson Beck. You don't have to make the spectacular play. Look at this defense that's backing you up. You just need to make the safe percentage throw. If there's nothing there, tuck the ball away, run it, get 7 yards. Keep us on schedule. Keep the chains moving. We'll bleed the clock. We'll get field position. We'll keep the opposing offense off the field. That formula is working. Let Marcel Reed implode. Let Julian Sayin make the big mistake. So Miami does not have to overextend. But like Beck made important completions. Like he completed some 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 5. I talked about this leading up to the game. Like that's what Julian Sayin needed to do. Well, Carson Beck was better at doing that, completing those 3rd and mediums. He threw darts, he threw strikes. So like he made some important plays, but Miami was not asking him to complete 25, 30-yard passes. Just hit that 8-yard pass on 3rd and 4. That's what he needed to do, and he did it.
He had a better game than he did versus Texas A&M, in my opinion. And you're right. He made the important throws. I think 138 yards is not much. That's very game manager-like game. But he made the complete throws how he's supposed to do it. You're right. But I think he had a better game this time than the Texas A&M game, because nobody was getting nowhere in that game. He actually moved the ball when he needed to, better than what he did last week. And that what made the difference a little bit. But my gosh, how are you going to stop that running game? They have not one running back, but 2. Where the hell did the Buckeyes defense go? They were not even close to even getting the backfield.
Well, in the first, it goes back to the conversation I had with Dr. C about the first half, that Ohio State was just flat-footed, and that's where the rust shows up. And it took Ohio State a full half to really kind of get up to speed. We saw Ohio State play better, more physical football in the second half. But first half, Miami was dump trucking, and it would have been worse if Fletcher hadn't fumbled in the red zone. So, looking ahead, whether it's Ole Miss or Georgia in the semifinals at the Fiesta Bowl, will Miami have the ability to establish that same physical upper hand? Because this time it won't be going up against a team that had a bye and has been sitting around. The rest and recuperation will be on an equal plane in the semis. But certainly in this game, you could sense that Ohio State needed some time to kind of work its way into full game speed. And Miami really took advantage in that first half and built an advantage that the Buckeyes were unable to overcome.
I will say this before I go, and I'm going to say it could have been worse. Miami could have really throttled them because they had no fear of going into the red zone and scoring the points. It could have been 38-14 if they would have punched it in a little bit more. If they can't turn those field goals into more points instead and like touchdowns, this could be bad. And this wasn't looking good for Ohio State to begin with. But I'll say the Alabama-Indiana game is starting to get more striking. Because when I look at Texas Tech and Oregon, that's my favorite game to watch. And maybe points will be involved. Now I'm wondering how would Alabama respond? Are they ready for another test of a good defense? They faced a good Oklahoma defense and they passed. Can they do the same thing again versus Indiana that has already been battle tested 2 or 3 times this year with other defenses like Iowa? Iowa's no pushover. That's what they do. And they already battle tested.
I would beat Vanderbilt.
And they did. Alabama beat Vanderbilt. They never had a good defense. Vanderbilt never had a good defense for Alabama. But they know how to score points. That's what Indiana does good. Are they ready for what's about to come? What's that Creed song? If you ever hear Creed, Are You Ready? That song, Are You Ready? Are they ready to really take the next step? Because this is a different level. Indiana's nothing to play with. They have proved themselves over and over again. And they beat Indiana, they beat Buckeyes, they beat Oregon, and they beat Iowa. 3 different tests. One that can score a lot, one that can have a really good defense, and the third one is a complete team. And that was 2 weeks ago.
Well, so let's kick around Indiana, Alabama based on what we've seen tonight with Miami versus Ohio State. So, can Alabama establish the physical standard Miami put down against the Buckeyes? So that's going to be the challenge for Alabama. Can Alabama play with the physicality that Miami displayed? And I'd be a little bit skeptical that it can. I think Miami has better dudes than Alabama, just in terms of the front lines, linebackers as well. Not that Alabama's chopped liver, but Miami, its defense and its front 7 in particular, ferocious, really hard hitting, smothered Ohio State in the first half. So can Alabama bring that level of heat? Can Alabama bring that level of ferocity to the table against Indiana? That's what Alabama's going to need. But it's going to be a challenge. Alabama was down 17-0 to Oklahoma, needed John Mateer to make some big mistakes. If you're Indiana, you have to go into this game thinking, if we are the physically superior team, and Indiana has been physically superior against the opponents it has faced, if we can be the physically superior team and Mendoza doesn't do what Julian Sayin did, gifts the opponent 7 points, Indiana should feel confident. So it's up to Alabama to play with the level of physicality that Miami showed. Now, if you are an Alabama fan, you are probably more confident now coming out of this Cotton Bowl between Miami and Ohio State for a very simple reason. Indiana barely beat Ohio State. Indiana scored just 13 points against the Buckeyes. Julian's saying, we saw his limitations here. Mm-hmm. So, it was certainly good that Indiana held Ohio State to 10 points, but Miami showed, you can hold down this Ohio State offense if you really have dudes on your defense. So Indiana does, Miami does, but Indiana able to score just 13. Miami scores 17, 24 total, but the offense scored 17. So if you're Alabama, you're probably thinking, well, if Indiana couldn't really create separation from this Ohio State team that Miami very clearly outplayed, we can probably hang with Indiana for 60 minutes. And we just get a big shot from Ty Simpson in an important spot in a high leverage situation. We can do that. So I think Alabama fans should be quietly confident after seeing Ohio State, not look all that impressive against Miami. Indiana was basically Ohio State's equal in what was a very close, low-scoring game. I'm not saying Alabama wins, but I'm saying that if you're going to look at tonight and perhaps change your opinion a little bit, you'd probably move it a little bit to the Alabama side. If Ohio State had thumped Miami, as some people thought was going to happen, then you'd say, oh, well, this Indiana team beat Ohio State, and Ohio State rocked Miami, so Hoosiers definitely going to win, right? So I'm not saying Indiana's going to lose. I think Indiana wins. Mm-hmm. But I do think that if you had to move the needle just a little bit in one direction, you'd probably lean ever so slightly.
I would say they got to establish a run. Alabama got to have some life. It's like a dead fish flopping on the deck. I mean, they have no idea they can move the line of scrimmage.
Got to help Ty Simpson. You got to give Ty Simpson some help. Absolutely.
They've got to. You can't take. He's not that guy to take the whole team multiple games, especially right now. This is not the time to put everything on them. They got to damn really man up, and someone got to punch the rock and move it 5 or 10 yards. Even 5 yards to be okay. But they got to have some damn balance. One-dimensional does not work in the playoffs, and we have surely seen that with Ohio State today. They were very one-dimensional, and Miami captured that. The question is not only the running game, but can the receiver step up? Where's the guy with the teddy bear? What's his name? Williams? I forgot his dang name, but that star receiver, he has not done as well as people think. He needs to step up.
They all do. But it goes back to Alabama needs to be physical enough to stand up to Indiana, and that's where skepticism of Alabama is definitely warranted, and that's where Indiana has the clear-cut advantage. Miami was stronger in the trenches than Ohio State. Indiana certainly seems to be stronger in the trenches than Alabama. So it's going to be up to Alabama to, raise its game, but also force a Mendoza mistake, get a big play or two from Ty Simpson. This is a contrast between Miami, Ohio State, and Indiana, Alabama. Miami was fine playing the game in a phone booth, playing the game in a limited amount of space. Carson Beck just having to make just convert the 7-yard pass on 3rd and 5, and you're fine. Yeah. I don't think Alabama is in a position to do the same thing. Alabama needs to hit some deep balls. Ty Simpson has to hit some deep balls. Like I don't see Alabama going 14 plays, 80 yards in 7 minutes against that Indiana defense, that Indiana front line. Alabama needs to push the envelope a little bit more, and it also needs to create turnovers from Mendoza and the Indiana offense. So, I don't think Alabama is strong enough to play that game incrementally the way Miami was able to do against Ohio State. But obviously, Alabama's going to need to be strong enough, going to need to run the ball at least enough to keep Indiana's defense off balance. It's going to be hard. That's why Alabama's probably going to need to take a few more risks than what we saw from Miami, which did not take risks and was still able to beat Ohio State. All right, Trey, anything else before we move along to our next caller?
Yes, the next thing I will say, how can they respond? They're doing pretty good on short yardage on 3rd down. Can they stay away from 3rd and 8, 3rd and 15, and costing penalties? I do have that sometimes. Since Kellen DeBoer, they have a problem with a lot of penalties, more than a lot of people we've seen. Can they stay away from self-inflicting wounds that keep it close? Because they got to hit some big plays, and with those big plays, and they know you're going to pass it, can you stop hurting yourself so you can get that opportunity instead of making it very obvious? Because it can be very easy for Indiana. Best pass coverage in college football right now.
Yep, absolutely. If Alabama is regularly in 3rd and 8 or longer, it's not winning that game, period.
It will take the running game right off.
Yeah,
God bless
absolutely.
everybody, man.
Trey, Happy New Year. Thanks for the call.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Okay. All right. The real MVP. Happy New Year. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Happy New Year, man. It'll be 1 minute and 30 seconds until it actually strikes midnight. But unfortunately,
we're actually there. Yeah, I didn't check my clock. All right.
Yeah, unfortunately for Ohio State's football season, it has struck midnight. Their season's over. And, this was in some ways unexpected, but in some ways I kind of saw this coming. I pointed out very rarely, because I didn't actually believe it myself, Ohio State's schedule is a bit sus. I didn't say go far as say they're frauds or anything, because they're not. But when your only decent win is beating Texas
in August
by 7 points, when Texas has shown that they at their worst could lose to Florida, and at their best they're a good team, but they're not going to win the national. They weren't capable of winning the national championship, in my opinion, this year. I just never believed that Ohio State was good enough to win it all this year, just based on any single game that they play. And I know they destroyed the cupcakes in the Big Ten, and the middle part of the Big Ten was terrible. But to me, that's what a good program or a great program is supposed to do. So to me, this was either coming this round or in the next round. And I think the biggest winner from tonight outside of Ohio State is Georgia, because, man, their path to the national championship game is a whole lot easier. Does that mean Miami should be just way underdogs? No. But it's a lot easier than Ohio State. And finally, I'll say, Happy New Year, Matt. It just hit 12 o'clock.
Happy New Year. So 2026 in the East. So everyone in the East, welcome to a new year. Hope it's great for you and your family. So the real MVP, I think one of the things that I was expecting in this game, and I thought Ohio State would win for a few reasons, but one was Ohio State was coming off a loss. And we saw how motivated Ohio State was coming off the Michigan loss. So I thought that after the Indiana loss, that would just get Ryan Day into a similar frame of mind that, hey, we got exposed. We have flaws. This is what we need to work on. So like they corrected them last year. Didn't happen this year. And so, my miscalculation, not just, thinking that, I was waiting for Carson Beck to make a mistake too. And like he has played mature football. He has really stepped up. It's not about the stats. Like he's not lighting it up, but he's avoiding the mistakes and he's letting his defense win. Just such a mature game from a very mistake-prone quarterback. So credit to Carson Beck. Salute. Tip of the cap. He has really cleaned up his game, and we're seeing how the crystal ball blueprint comes together when the quarterback doesn't make mistakes. Just doing that, mistake avoidance. We can talk about spectacular highlight reel plays all we want, but just not giving anything away, just doing that can mean the world to a football team, especially when Mario Cristobal is your head coach. So that's part of it. But I was really disappointed by the way Ryan Day, coming off a loss, what was his plan? He was calling these slow developing plays, running and passing. Like his first two passes were straight dropbacks. Slow developing, having Sayin go through 3 or 4 progressions. Like the way to get Julian Sayin involved in this game, coming off the Indiana loss, give him easy stuff, screens, dump offs, quick hitches that that the opposing defense couldn't pick off. You can structure your quick hitters such that you don't invite other defenders into the play. So Ryan Day, his concept, his approach, his line of attack, his play design, all off. And you got to wonder. Brian Hartline was doing that for the season. Ryan Day took it over. There was some rust, not just for Ohio State's team, but I think Ryan Day, he thought he could just kind of step right back into that. No, didn't work. Like he would certainly want a do-over for this game. So those were some of the things that I didn't see coming, that I miscalculated. I didn't think Ohio State was going to drill Miami, but I did think that it was going to be very hard for Miami to score, and it didn't turn out that way, not at all. So I would say, Darrell, that your analysis about Ohio State not really having an elite performance against an elite team, that's very salient because Arch Manning was atrocious in that August game, and Ohio State won by only 7, right? If Ohio State was really locked in, could have, won that game by 21, 28, but it won by only 7 and then didn't play Oregon, as you noted, and, scored only 10 against Indiana. So, yeah, like the Big Ten, and this is a point I know you've been making, Darrell, was not a deep, really strong conference this season. Had a big, mushy middle. And, so like Indiana and Ohio State were at the top, but Oregon didn't show a whole lot. And, now we go into that Orange Bowl against Texas Tech. Going to be really interesting to see what version of the Ducks we have. But, the Big Ten, it's having a good bowl season. Obviously, tonight was a step back, but the Big Ten was not especially impressive during the regular season. Like I follow USC. USC was like 4th or 5th in the Big Ten. And, we all saw in the Alamo Bowl how ordinary USC is. and we saw how ordinary Michigan is as well this season. Those programs have taken, Michigan's taken steps back from its national championship standard, and USC's failing to reach a college football playoff standard. So there's a lot of ordinary football in the Big Ten, and so the idea that Ohio State was not a fully realized, fully actualized team, Daryl, that's really on point analysis.
Right, and something that hasn't been brought up, but in hindsight, I think we should, is it's weird to say because this was probably the most assured unit in all of football, but Ohio State has some problem on the offense. I don't know what that problem is. I can't pinpoint it, but outside of Jeremiah Smith, who is by far the best player in the game, in my opinion, I mean, without him, they get absolutely killed in this game and probably lose even way worse than they ended up doing. But their three best teams, and there are only three good teams with the post, they scored 14, 14, and 10. That's just not going to cut it in today's college football, only scoring 14 points against these elite teams. I know they got these elite wide receivers and elite offense, and they've got the best of every offensive position, it feels like. So I really don't know why they're this bad on offense. But they only gave up 24 points to Miami. And I'm saying only because in today's college football, that's what you expect. I mean, if last year's Ohio State team or 2023 or 2022's Ohio State team played this Miami team, their offense, I think they win this game, to be honest with you. I think their offense is the biggest unit that's taken a step back. I have no idea what happened this year, but something has gone drastically wrong with their offense.
And that's why it just kills me again. I mean, and some people think I'm beating a dead horse here. I understand, but I think people really need to grasp this and wrap their minds around this. Julian Sayin was a Heisman finalist. Based on what? Based on completing 90% of passes against Wisconsin and UCLA? Like, what an absolute joke. And that stat you mentioned, that Ohio State did not score more than 14 points against Texas and Indiana, and tonight against Miami. Obviously, the Miami game came after the Heisman vote. But like Ohio State, the two biggest opponents it faced, Texas and then Indiana, didn't score more than 14 points, and Julian Sayin went to New York, and Jacob Rodriguez didn't, and Ruben Bain didn't. Can we begin to understand? I think this has been such an under-discussed story in national college football this season. It just seemed to be that people felt, oh, Mendoza should win the Heisman. He threw these late touchdown passes. Like, you don't just throw a few late touchdown passes and that means you're the Heisman winner. Like, you need to be really good all the time against really good opposition. And so winning a 20-15 game in Iowa in which you threw an interception and you jeopardized your team's chances of winning, you won the game. That doesn't mean you win the Heisman. Mendoza throws a pick against Penn State that jeopardizes his team's chances of winning. All right, he overcomes it. He won a game, but that doesn't mean you win a Heisman. Heisman quarterbacks are Joe Burrow 2019, Marcus Mariota 2014, Cam Newton 2010, Sam Bradford 2008. Those are Heisman quarterbacks. They dominated. They roasted the whole season. They cooked. They'd hang 50. They'd hang 60. Those are Heisman quarterbacks. This was not even close. And I think I don't have the sense that people really talked about it a whole lot or cared about it a whole lot. And it just kills me. So like Julian Sayin, good year. He's a winner. He's a good teammate. And of course, he's going to get better. He has a lot of room
to
grow. But the idea that he was one of the four best players in college football. I mean, what an absolute joke.
No, the two best quarterbacks I saw today was Diego Pavia and Carson Beck. I'm not sure if you caught any of the Iowa Vanderbilt game. Diego Pavia looked like Superman out there. He was when his receivers would actually catch the ball, he was launching moon balls 60 yards down the field, just right in the breadbasket, and do that consistently. Without him, they absolutely get killed in that game. So to me, in terms of most valuable per player to team, Diego Pavia is the most valuable player. Now, I don't know if you want to give him the Heisman because I don't think he's the best player, and I don't think his game at all can transfer to the NFL. But without him, they probably win 7 or 6 games.
If there was an MVP if we had specifically an MVP award, it would be him, because what he means to Vanderbilt is just, it's hard to find an equivalent comparison. Mendoza has helped Indiana. Sayin has helped Ohio State, but they're surrounded by dudes. They're surrounded by elite defensive linemen who really, drive the bus for those teams. But Pavia is Vanderbilt. You take him away, you take away basically the heartbeat of the whole team. So that is definitely a different conversation to have.
Right, and I want to talk about some unsung winners for tonight. First, one unsung winner is every single person that laughed at Notre Dame for arguing they shouldn't be in the college football playoff. I mean, if you're a Notre Dame man, not only does Miami and Alabama both win one game, Miami's already won 2 games in the college football playoff. And Notre Dame's case by the hour keeps looking weaker and weaker. And second biggest winner for today who didn't play is Alabama. If I'm Kalen DeBoer, first thing I'm doing in the morning, I'm putting on the tape. I'm showing that final score. I'm saying, man, Ohio State got killed today. How good is Indiana? We at our best can absolutely beat Indiana. Look what this team did, who we know isn't that great because Louisville and SMU beat them, for goodness sake. Louisville beat them at home, by the way. Best win of the season, man. Louisville going to Miami and winning. Think about that. Good for the ACC.
Yeah, but Miller Moss, a guy who, and my former partner Tim Prangley's in the chat, like Miller Moss beat Miami on the road. It's kind of amazing to contemplate that.
Yeah, I know, and he has not played well at all this season for the Louisville Cardinals, but that's beside the point.
He had a rough year, but he was good against Miami. Yeah.
Anybody who's saying Alabama doesn't have a chance or anything like that, I think we need to reevaluate the absolute top of the Big Ten, because there was this preconceived notion that, okay, the Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon tier is absolutely elite. The middle of the Big Ten, it's a bit shaky and the bottom's crap. Maybe the elite of the Big Ten isn't elite and they're just great. Maybe Georgia is the best team in the country. And I hate to say it, but man, an Alabama-Georgia rematch is looking awfully more likely by the day. How great would that be for the sport?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's helpful to make the distinction between, number one team, and Indiana absolutely deserves to be the number one seed. So let's not get it twisted here. Indiana absolutely deserves to be the number one seed. But there are certain kinds of number one seeds, right? Sometimes there's a number one seed like, Purdue in the NCAA tournament, and on the other hand, like, 2009 North Carolina or 2012 Kentucky, an absolute juggernaut, go right through the field. There are different kinds of number one seeds. So Indiana is not 2001 Miami. Indiana is not 1995 Nebraska. It's number one seed, and it deserves its number one seed, but it's not this incredible, overwhelming juggernaut. It's just a team that's won 13 games. And Daryl, I know you'd say this, so I'll say it for you. Indiana didn't play anybody out of conference. So, what's this going to look like? We don't know. And Alabama seeing Ohio State look ordinary, knowing that Indiana and Ohio State were pretty much on even terms. Like, it's not as though that Indiana-Ohio State game was, one of the all-time epic 1-versus-2 battles. Like, you wouldn't put that up there with, let's say, 1996 Florida versus Florida State. Two teams that were basically walking NFL combines. Spurrier versus Bowden, and you had Danny Werfel and his receivers against Florida State's pass rushers, Reinhard Wilson, Peter Bulware. Like, you just had dudes all over the field. Also, like, any time that Miami and Florida State played in the late 80s or early 90s, like, those games were they felt so large. And Indiana, Ohio State 2025 don't really exist on that same plane. So I would certainly think that after watching tonight that Alabama's going to say, hey, we can do this. Absolutely. Doesn't mean they will. But I think if you are an Alabama player, you're thinking, we can certainly get this done. And now we get to find out in the grand day.
Absolutely. If I'm Alabama also, I'm thinking, man, if we play like we did the first time against Georgia, going into Georgia, we're absolutely winning this game. Like, to me, I thought Indiana beating Ohio State was the best performance of the season until this game, where I think Ohio State got exposed. as they're still one of the 5 best teams in the country because they're Ohio State. I'm not saying they're trash or anything like that, but there's a clear gap between them and the elites, as there usually are. There's usually 2 or 3 teams that separate themselves every single year. And I just put in Ohio State in that category because they're Ohio State. They only lost to the number 1 team. They don't belong in that category. Alabama should take advantage of that, point it out to their players, staff, coaches, being like, hey, this Indiana team could be ordinary. We don't have to do anything extraordinary, just like the Miami game plan. Ty Simpson, don't turn the ball over. Don't screw up. They're wide receivers. Hold on to the football. Don't drop the football. They do that, I think there's a pretty good chance they win this game. I was like at 15% like 4 hours ago. I'm at like 35-40% Alabama wins this game. And man, you want to talk about a disaster. If the Big Ten gets 0 teams into the Final Four, which is looking pretty like Texas Tech's only 2.5-point underdogs, and then Indiana's got all the hopes and they're going to be the less talented team, that's a disaster for the Big Ten. How 2 days changed the narrative? Big Ten man was talking all crap about how the little old SEC was down, and then you might not get a single team in the Final Four.
Yeah, so we'll find out soon enough. Like, I know you have your talking points ready. Now we just need to tee it up, play these games, and see where we are. But like, I will say this, that like this feels like the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl, because the Sugar Bowl, it's SEC versus SEC. It just is not going to influence the national conversation one way or the other. But the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl, man, those feel like major tectonic shifts in the making, one way or the other, that those games are going to radically change the way we perceive this 2025 college football season and how good teams were and how good conferences were. The Orange and Rose Bowl, a lot on the line in those 2 games, Darrell. Anything else you have for us?
Yeah, the final thing I'll say to highlight your point is Texas Tech, especially. The ACC's won 2 playoff games this year. You want to be considered a legitimate conference in the Power 4, Texas Tech, you have to win this game. It went from
never won a playoff game. That's right.
Right. They have to win it. They're 0-7. We can't make it 0-8 to be taken legitimately anymore. Anyway, Matt, thank you for hosting the show. It's always a great day when Ohio State loses. There's just a few fan bases out there. Everybody gets along, gathers. Alabama, Ohio State. Anytime these top tier teams lose, it's a great day. So 2026 starting off great. Hopefully tomorrow we get a bunch of great games like today, man. Enjoy the new year.
And the same to you. Thank you so much, Darrell. Really appreciate it. Seeing in the chat, people are saying Indiana's in trouble. I'm not saying Indiana's in trouble. I'm just saying if you're going to look at tonight's game and you're Alabama, you're feeling a little bit more confident than you did going in. I think Indiana wins because I think Indiana's more physical and has better line play than Alabama. But I do think if you're going to look at this game tonight, the Cotton Bowl, and draw any meaning from it, and you're Alabama, you're probably feeling more confident. Whereas if Ohio State had drilled Miami and you were Alabama, I'd be saying Alabama should be less confident. That's all I'm saying, okay? Don't try and read extra things into that. All right, let's go to our next caller. Adriel, is that the correct pronunciation? If not, let me know.
Hey, what's up, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, is your name pronounced Adriel?
Oh, it's Adriel.
Adriel, okay. Welcome and thanks for calling, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I don't have much to comment on the Miami-Ohio State game. I'll just say this. I think the Indiana-Ohio State game was a huge indicator on why they lost today. I feel like they got beat in the trenches, kind of like against Texas, And I don't think Ohio State got tested the whole season in the trenches like that today because Sane was under a lot of pressure in the first half. And they just couldn't, produce that offensive explosion like they usually do, the past few years. But anyways, I just wanted to call because I just wanted to bring up the subject that, not one team that got a bye week in the past 2 playoff years, 12-team playoff years, has won a game yet. I know it's a small sample size, but do you think these bye teams are kind of disadvantaged against these teams that are, playing the first round.
I mean, I think that, in the first quarter, starting a little slow, just trying to get up to game speed, that is a real thing. But like after the first 10 to 15 minutes, if you're a really good team, if you're a number one, number two team, you should be able to deliver the goods. I will say that, think about last year. Let's just talk about last year because we know what's been happening this year. We know what happened tonight with, a bye team losing to a 10 seed. But let's go back to last year. Last year, Boise State and Arizona State got byes. And so that's a little different, right? Because that was under the playoff format, which had conference champions getting those byes. So we know that Boise State was a 3 seed, but it wasn't the number 3 team in the country. Arizona State was the 4 seed, but it wasn't the 4th best team in the country. So like those two examples of byes, teams with byes losing, you got to put that in a separate category because in this year's playoff, if you had Boise State and Arizona State from last year in this year's playoff, they wouldn't have been seeded 3 and 4, right? They would have been seeded toward the back end of the playoff field as opposed to the top half or top third of the field. But so the more instructive examples from last year or last season with the byes in the first round. So Oregon ran into the best team. Ohio State was the best team, and Ohio State was the 8th seed. Like that was pretty ridiculous that Oregon drew Ohio State in the quarters. That was just really unfortunate bracketing. Ohio State was an 8 seed, but we all know that Ohio State team was the most talented. That those Buckeyes underachieved in the regular season, but once they got in the playoff, they got that second chance. They steamrolled everybody. So it was an 8 seed technically, but playing like a 1 seed. So that's the Oregon bye loss in last season's playoff. And then Notre Dame over Georgia in the other game. And that was with Gunnar Stockton replacing an injured Carson Beck. And Gunnar Stockton, wasn't awful in that game, but he wasn't, the polished, developed, high-end quarterback he has become this season. So really, last year's examples of teams with byes losing in the quarterfinals, there you can place asterisks near all 4 of those games. So I think this year it's much more instructive seeing Miami do this to Ohio State because it wasn't as though you can make the argument that, like Ohio State ran into Miami was the clearly better team, but it's not as though 2025 Miami is on par with 2024 Ohio State. I don't think anybody would make that kind of comparison. Ohio State just got beat. So I don't think you'd place any sort of asterisk next to this one. This game really did feel like a team with a bye being rusty and the team with playing the first round looking sharper. So I think that conversation and that talking point about the bye hurting the team that sits around, that gained real traction tonight in a way that last season's playoff didn't provide.
Yeah, and I forgot about Arizona State and Boise State. I totally forgot about those 2 teams. But no, that's a good point. What if Ole Miss beats Georgia tomorrow and what's the other game?
Bama, Indiana, and Oregon, Texas Tech.
Yeah, what if Texas Tech and Oregon, did they both have byes?
No, Oregon played James Madison, so Texas Tech is
what if
bye.
Tech wins and what if Bama wins? That'd be kind of crazy, right?
Sure would be.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen, but I'm kind of I think it would be a cool thing if that did happen, and I think that would hold on 1 second.
And just while Adriel is regrouping here, we've gone over an hour. If you want a second hour, I'm going to take everyone who's on the phones right now. But if you want a second hour, I need to see a C note. Okay. So I'm happy to do a second hour, but we need to get the super chats right. That would apply for Mark. It applies for me. It applies for anyone who's in the chair hosting. That you want additional hours. There has to be an investment in that product here at the Voice of College Football. All right, Adriel, you ready to rejoin the call? Adriel? Okay. Adriel, I'm going to leave you here, okay? I'm going to leave you here, and I'm going to go to our next caller, Keith.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Okay.
Okay, we can both cry in our beer a little bit. Both our guys went down today.
You're talking about Michigan and USC?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so
both kind of
3rd and 20, baby. 3rd and 20. 4 missed tackles. We're never going to
ugly in their own way, right? Ugly in their own way. You probably have more tears than I do because we could see it from about the beginning of the 4th quarter.
Yeah. I mean, and Texas was favored. USC was favored and had a 10-point lead and squandered it. So that was
really.
Here's the thing, Keith. This is hardly the worst loss that Lincoln Riley's USC has had. The Cotton Bowl was worse. The Cotton Bowl against Tulane was worse. And the worst game of all was the 43-42 loss to Utah in Salt Lake City in 2022. If USC wins that game, it goes 12-0, and it makes the playoff, even if it loses to Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. So, that's kind of the pathetic part. This was hardly, not even close, one of the 3 worst Lincoln Riley losses at USC. So that's a sad commentary in itself.
And this year, Oregon doesn't even make the list?
No, not even close.
Not even close, huh?
Not even close.
That's a sad history, man.
Here, the worst USC losses under Lincoln Riley, 43-42 to Utah in the 2022 regular season, the Cotton Bowl, all right, the 52-42 loss to Washington, wasting an epic game by Caleb Williams, and then losing to the pig farmer, Bryson Barnes. All those losses are worse than the Alamo Bowl against TCU.
Okay. But this thing about OSU is I think I see a similarity between this Miami team, Michigan of the last 4 years. And
the Harbaugh years, the good Harbaugh years.
The good Harbaugh years, yeah. And that is, and 1 year of Sharon Moore, because Sharon Moore handled them 1 year too. So, and that is when Day faces a couple of monsters in the D line, he runs into a problem. And Miami had that today. They have a couple of monsters on that D line that they can't push out of the way and push them the way they want to, open up holes in the running game. And Ohio State had that with about every team this year. Their offensive line couldn't push defensive lines around and run the ball.
The Ohio State running game was not relentlessly consistent or overwhelming. That's absolutely true. And this gets back to Ryan Day's plan, right? I thought that Ryan Day needed to make the game easy for Julian Sayin and give him quick throws, easy throws, high percentage throws. Get the ball to your receivers in space. Like Ryan Day did not give Jeremiah Smith nearly as many touches in this game as he needed to, as he should have. I struggle to understand what Ryan Day really wanted to achieve. I mean, he did run the ball on first down early in the game, so I guess he wanted to see if his run game could go right into the teeth of the Miami defense, but that went right into the strength of what Miami had. I think Ryan Day needed to play this game more through his receivers and make sure that his quarterback felt comfortable. But the way he started this game, that really wasn't what Ryan Day was trying to do. And Miami just swallowed up the Buckeyes. So like Ryan Day didn't have it. I will say that, Julian Sayin, he's just at the beginning of his evolutionary arc of his growth curve. So like, this is not a loss I'm going to really hammer Ryan Day about, but still, his plan was crap and not ready for the moment. And he did not do a good job studying Miami, scouting Miami, watching on film, learning from the Texas A&M game. It was one of the worst coach games that Ryan Day's had. But he had a young quarterback. He had an offense that, as Real MVP mentioned, scored just 14 against Texas at home, scored just 10 points against Indiana. Like, this was not the year for Ohio State to put it all together on offense. Next year, the expectations are going to be bigger, and there's going to be the expectation that the bar is going to be raised significantly for Ryan Day in Columbus.
Yeah, I just see like I agree with the first caller is the one-dimensional offense. Last year, Day had Judkins and Henderson, who are both tearing up the NFL right now. And they had these they probably didn't appreciate them enough. They had these generational running backs that could run through tight holes and make something. And you take those away. I don't see Bo Jackson and any of the other running backs getting drafted. They just don't look like elite Big Ten quarterbacks, let alone pros.
Yeah, I mean, last season's Ohio State team was an NFL Combine special. Like, that team just had dudes everywhere, and the talent across the board just wasn't as good this year. So, like, Ryan Day coached horribly in this game, but this was not like a super team, certainly on the offensive side of the ball. And Ohio State could, win games pretty easily against inferior teams, not asking Julian Sayin to do too much. But you go up against a much better team in Miami. Like, Ryan Day needed to figure out how to make Julian Sayin comfortable, and he swung and missed. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I agree with you that they had to get him going with shorter routes. And even in the middle of the game, you could see it would be 3rd and 3, and all the receivers would be running 15-plus yard routes, and nobody's running in the 5 to 10 yard range. That's really tough for a quarterback to complete third downs when there's not that easy conversion for him.
Yeah, it took a half for Ohio State, Day, Sayin, basically everyone to begin to play the right way. You saw in the second half when Ohio State's offense gained momentum, you saw Julian Sayin take the check down. You saw him settle for the 5-6 yard pass. He was not doing that early, but it shows that Ryan Day really didn't have him properly prepared, and it really cost Ohio State in that first half.
Yes, and plus they were kind of gifted a path last year. Is that that in the Tennessee game last year, Nico Taimala, whatever his name is. Yeah, I always have a hard time pronouncing those big names.
Just call him Nico.
Nico, yeah. Nico went with like 5 other players and demanded more NIL money because they were going an extra game or they weren't going to play.
Okay, but he played.
Played.
Ohio State did not have an easy path. I mean, Ohio State dump trucked Oregon, but like, it played the number 1 seed, a 13-0 team with a veteran quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. Like, that's not an easy path.
No. Let me say though, the first game, the Tennessee was divided. There was half the starting team was not in the best of mood. They were thinking about other things than rather the game. Distractions.
Yeah. Okay, so Ohio State had an easy first round game. I'll give you that. But overall path, that's different. Like, number 1 seed Oregon, and then a Quinn Ewers Texas team in the semis. Like, that was not an easy path to the national championship.
No, and I will say this about Oregon. I thought Oregon was going to stump everybody last year. I was, but when Ohio State rolled into Oregon, Oregon looked like some of the near best teams that Saban had in the past that were reading their own press, and Saban called it what?
Go ahead and tell me.
Rat poison.
Mm.
He told the press, "Stop writing this rat poison about my guys.
Yeah.
They're reading it, they're believing it. You're hurting us." And I think that's what happened to Oregon last year, because remember that opening and that, I mean, Ohio State had like a 4-touchdown lead at halftime.
Just absolutely. The game was over in the second quarter. Let me step in on that. You know, Oregon and Ohio State did not play in the regular season last year, and it brings up this point, Keith, that in the age of these super conferences, 16 in the SEC, 17 in the ACC, 18 teams in the Big Ten, you're not going to play a lot of high-end games. You're going to have a few, but you're not going to have all the top teams playing each other. Like it was similar this year. Ohio State and Oregon did not play in the regular season. So actually, wait, Oregon did beat Ohio State last year. So my bad there.
You're right. Yeah.
The point does remain that in these larger size conferences, the top teams don't always play each other. And so the strength of schedule gets skewed, right? You might go unbeaten in your conference, but you'll skip a few of the higher end opponents. So how good you actually are. Like, did we know that Oregon was a juggernaut? And that Oregon Ohio State game in Eugene last year, that went right down to the wire, and it easily could have gone the other way. If Ohio State doesn't commit a penalty at the end of that game, Ohio State might win on the road in Eugene. It was
touch and go.
Finish. It was a photo finish. So the idea that Oregon was head and shoulders above Ohio State, obviously not true. I don't know what the betting line was for that game, but I know it was pretty close. I think it was certainly under 4 points.
Except
no one was favored by a huge margin in that game. So it goes back to the point of you can be a number one team, you can be a number one seed. That doesn't mean you're way above the rest of the field. But sometimes there's a number one team that dominates, like 1995 Nebraska, like 2001 Miami, some of the other real juggernauts, 2019 LSU. But that doesn't mean that every year the number one seed or the number one team is obviously the best. Now, could Indiana win it all? Sure it could. But Indiana is not several laps above, the second and third best teams in the country. That's obviously not the case.
Okay, let me say this, is that last year's Oklahoma developed during the season into looking like they were a juggernaut, because they, as Ohio State was losing their second game to Michigan and backed into the playoffs almost, Ohio State
they did back into the playoffs.
Yeah, okay, and Oregon stomped Indiana in the championship game. Stomped them like 35-3, wasn't it?
Oregon beat Penn State in the title game, and it was something like 45-35 or 45-38, something like that.
Oh, 45-38 to Penn State. Okay.
Yeah, it was a shootout. Penn State scored a lot on Oregon.
Okay. All right. So, okay, but now back to this year, though. So, but anyways, somehow I think Ohio State got momentum in last year's through a bit of luck, but they did have the most impressive run in playoff history to win the championship, and I'll give them credit for that. But like I say, they were given a break against Tennessee, and I think they were given a break against Oregon. They were kind of lucky in both those games.
Well, they absolutely steamrolled Oregon. I don't see how that was luck. I think Oregon was unlucky to draw Ohio State. That might be the way to phrase
I
that.
think Oregon was not prepared for the toughness of that game. I thought they thought it was going to be an easier game than it was going to be.
Well, let's remember it was a rematch, and Oregon won the first game. In rematches, it's really hard to win that second time if the talent is equal, because the other team just has the motivation. Remember Alabama LSU in 2011, that LSU barely eked out the win in the first game. Alabama had all the motivation and all the energy, the juice for the rematch. And even though it was in the Superdome, which should have been LSU's home field, Alabama just absolutely swamped LSU. Like LSU didn't cross midfield until like garbage time, when Alabama had already buried that game and put it to bed. So Oregon was just really unlucky. But Ohio State was simply a beneficiary of the 12-team playoff, right? If there's a 4-team playoff, Ohio State doesn't win the national championship last season. So
you're right.
Ohio State took advantage of that. All right, Keith, I need to move it along. Anything else you have for us?
The only thing I want to finish with is the thing that you say about Alabama having to establish a physical presence in the game like Miami did. The only problem with that is whereas Ohio State's rushing game was in the 40s or the 50s nationally, Alabama's rushing game is in the 100th range, 80th to the 100th range.
It's going to be hard for Alabama to establish the run, so that's why Indiana has the edge fundamentally.
Yep, and so I think both Alabama and Oregon are in very good shape. You know, we've had previous discussions. I've got Oregon a 2-3 score favorite over Texas Tech. I disagree with Vegas, but
you're taking Oregon not -2.5, but -9.5.
I would take them at -9.5 and maybe even -12.5.
So if you're in a state where betting is legal, man, you can get that adjusted spread for a very fat plus money price.
Yeah.
So if you're able to put down a bet, good luck to you, Keith.
Yep. Okay. Good. All right. Too bad we both.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and hopefully next year will finish better than this year for both our guys.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith. All right, Adam, I'm going to come to you soon, but Adriel called in earlier. He had something to interrupt him, so I need to come back to him to finish up. Adriel, welcome back.
Hey, what's up, Matt? Yeah, sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties there.
Okay.
But no, I just want to switch the subject up. So I didn't know you were a USC fan, right?
I host the USC show and I blog Trojans Wire. I will say my late father, USC class of 1963. So I do have, he went to the school, studied there. So I do have a soft spot in my heart for USC, but I never attended the school. But I want to see USC do well for sure.
That's awesome. So who's your team?
Well, I cover USC. So, I'm a editor, blogger, podcaster, commentator. So like, I don't really refer to myself really as a fan. But if USC wins, it's good for my bottom line. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's fair enough. So, I'm sure you watched the game yesterday, right? Crazy game.
Yeah, very crazy.
That last play, man. Like when the TC receiver tiptoed on the sideline for the touchdown there, and the referees are calling, or were they saying, get off the field? There's no touchdown or something like that.
It was ruled a touchdown, as far as I know.
Yeah, but the referees were like saying, I think they were calling it not a touchdown at first because they had to review the play at first. But anyways, that was crazy, crazy ending to that game. And where do you see the future of USC going forward?
Well, first off, they got to hire a defensive coordinator to replace Danton Lynn, and Pete Kwiatkowski, I think, should be the guy. And when I say should, I'm not saying I'm predicting that. I'm saying they need to get him. Like, he should be their number one choice. It's really very simple. Ohio State's on USC's schedule next year. or if you're in the East this year, because it's 2026, Ohio, USC has not played Ohio State yet since the Big Ten expanded to 18 teams. So now Ohio State's going to be on the schedule rotation in 2026 and 2027. Pete Kwiatkowski's Texas defense held Ohio State to 14 points in the Horseshoe in Columbus. So, like, for me, not very complicated, Lincoln Riley. You need to go get Pete Kwiatkowski. So that needs to be USC's top target, and I think Ryan Walters of Washington is the plan B if Kwiatkowski says no.
That's crazy. I'm a Texas fan. I know we just got rid of him, and I'm glad we got Muschamp and all that. I mean, I think that's a great hire for our team, my team. But yeah, I think that would be a good hire for USC. I mean, I think a lot of people want to see USC come, to national relevance again, and so yeah, US playing Ohio State is going to be like a huge opportunity for USC. If they can like get that win.
It's an opportunity. Yeah, it's an opportunity if you win, and if you lose, Lincoln Riley is in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah, like, oh man, like how much time do you think he has at USC left? Like, how many years do you think?
I think he absolutely must go 9-3 for there to be any conversation about him getting another year in 2027. I think if he goes 8-4 or worse, he has to be fired. He has to be gone. 2026 will be his 5th season. You can't go 0-5 for the playoff at USC and expect to keep your job. And I personally would fire him if he went 9-3. I think he needs to go 10-2. But just being realistic, like, I'm not Jen Cohen. I'm not sitting in her chair. I would fire Lincoln Riley if he fails to go 10-2 next season. I think Jen Cohen might cut Lincoln Riley a little bit of slack and keep him for one more year if he goes 9-3. But 8-4, gonzo. Absolutely has to be out of there. The reason for keeping Lincoln Riley for 2027, I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it, is that, well, you need another recruiting class. You need another recruiting class to back up 2026, get that extra cycle, that extra layer of depth into the program. Then you'll be ready to put it all together completely. I understand that line of thinking, but really, does Alabama keep a coach if he misses the playoff 5 straight years? Does Ohio State keep a coach if he misses the playoff 5 straight years? There are lots of blue blood schools that would not put up with being 0-5 in terms of making the playoff. I think he should be gone if he doesn't get 10-2. But politically, reading the tea leaves, Jen Cohen might give him another year if he goes 9-3.
You know what's crazy? When he first went there, I thought he was going to translate like OU's success all the way to USC, like on the first year, maybe the second year. And
it happened in year 1, but then it fell off.
What was his record year 1?
11-2 or 11-3, counting the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, Caleb Riley. That was Caleb Riley. So yeah, but yeah, he just went downhill from there, and it's just weird seeing Lincoln Riley not live up to the expectations he did at OU, at USC. But how's the recruiting class going, and how's that going? And
number one recruiting class for 2026. So that's why he still has a job. That they're giving him a chance to coach these elite recruits that General Manager Chad Bowden brought in, and now we turn to the portal in January. And so USC needs to get a big dog wide receiver, if not 2, and it needs to get some premium defensive tackles to beef up that defensive line, and a pass rush that just could not get home this season. Got a few sacks against TCU, but remember, that's a backup quarterback for TCU. This pass rush was just awful this season. So USC needs elite wide receivers to replace Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, and you need some nasty, fire-breathing defensive tackles, because when Pete Carroll got USC back to national prominence over 20 years ago, wild bunch too, right? Sean Cody, all those other guys up front. USC needs a nasty defensive line, and the Trojans are far short of that standard right now.
Yeah, well, I'm like kind of hoping you got UCS does better, but so do you remember the Valero Bowl in 2016 with TCU in Oregon?
Bram Kohlhausen.
Yeah,
And
so man, that was one of my
TCU's made some crazy Alamo Bowl comebacks. There was that one over Oregon. There was the Kenny Hill comeback over Stanford, and now this one. So TCU has magic, as Jackson Johnson would say. TCU does some amazing things in Alamo Bowls, and USC was on the wrong end of it the other night.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite bowl games of all time, man. That TCU comeback. I think they were down 31-0, and great game. What's crazy is Bram Kohlhausen. You know, I was looking at he was at the sideline. He was on the sidelines yesterday.
Yeah,
and he was missing 2 legs. I'm like, what
missing
the freak?
2 legs. Yeah,
And then I was like, what the heck is that really him? And I did some research, and supposedly got into a helicopter accident. He fell out of a helicopter. That's how he lost 2 of his legs.
Yeah, that was jarring to see.
Man, I was like, what the frick? I just watched this guy freaking do a heroic performance a few years ago. Yeah. And I don't mean to be a damper on the mood here. That was just really surprising to me.
Yeah, it was surprising for a lot of people, myself included.
Yeah, but hey, it was a good game, and hey, thanks for taking my call, and you have a good night, man.
Sure.
Good show.
Happy New Year, Adriel. Thanks for calling in. All right. And now we get to Adam Lamparello, friend of the show, host of the Rutgers show, the Rutgers channel here at the Voice of College Football. Like, subscribe, share the Rutgers channel at the Voice of College Football. Adam, Happy New Year. How you doing?
Thanks a lot, Matt. Happy New Year to you too. I'll be quick. I just had a couple of questions. So before the game tonight, the conventional wisdom is that Ohio State's going to defeat a Miami team that lost to Louisville, lost to SMU. What I saw tonight was Miami dominating the trenches. So my question for you is, what does this portend for the remainder of the playoff games? We think Georgia's going to beat Ole Miss. We think Oregon might edge out Texas Tech, at least some will. And, Indiana's favored over Alabama. Could we see results like that we didn't expect in the next 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, a 10 seed beating a 2 seed, right? And last year we had an 8 seed beating a 1. I know that Ohio State was the better team than Oregon, but nevertheless, how you play in the 12 games of the regular season doesn't necessarily translate to the playoff, right? Ohio State underachieved in the regular season last season, and then it turned into the elite team many people were expecting in the playoff. So are we going to have that with Alabama? Alabama loses 3 games in the regular season, gets past that test against Oklahoma. Are we going to see a rebirth of Alabama? Are we going to see the team that went into Athens and beat Georgia? Is that team going to show up? Because if that team does show up, Alabama probably beats Indiana. But the question is, will that team show up? Alabama, as we all know, had a difficult November. Ty Simpson wasn't the same late in the season as he was in that Georgia game and in the first half of the season. So, does Alabama find a way to recapture the way it was playing in late September, early to mid-October? Going to be really interesting. And I think Miami beating Ohio State, it increases the intrigue for New Year's Day with the Orange and Rose Bowls especially. Like, again, Georgia Ole Miss, not only is it SEC versus SEC, that kind of takes the fun out of it, right? There's no conference drama there. It's also a rematch. They already played. So really the Sugar Bowl is a few notches below the Orange and the Rose in terms of overall intrigue and national significance. But those Orange and Rose Bowl games, man, they again, as I told DeReal MVP, Adam, earlier in the show, they're going to significantly change the way the national conversation goes. They're going to significantly change perceptions of the balance of power of both teams and conferences in college football this season.
Yeah, great response. And I just think that the assumptions that we had going into this game might prove that our assumptions about the other games and who we think is going to win might be proven wrong. And speaking of Indiana and Alabama, as you know, I am an Alabama fan. This week I did a real deep dive on Indiana. And as much as it pains me to say this, Indiana is elite. They are incredibly, incredibly disciplined. They don't make mistakes. They're very physical up front. And my initial thought was Alabama can, in the Rose Bowl, beat Indiana. But now I'm thinking this is going to be a very tall task for the Tide. And I hate to say that because I really want them to win. So my only conclusion from watching Indiana on tape is that the only way that Alabama can win is if we establish a running game, which we haven't done all year. How can we do that against that Indiana front?
It's going to be really hard, right? That is like climbing Mount Everest. That's going to be the Everest-sized task in front of Alabama. I would say, and, I agree. Alabama needs to find a way to run the ball just enough to take some heat off Ty Simpson. I think that is definitely important. But if you ask me, Adam, what is the best and most realistic path for Alabama to win this game? It's forcing a Mendoza pick. That is the most direct path. Indiana generally doesn't make mistakes, but Mendoza has thrown interceptions in some notable spots against Iowa, against Oregon, against Penn State. So he has made mistakes at times. Hasn't made a whole lot of mistakes in aggregate over the course of the whole season, but he will make a big mistake at times, and Alabama's going to need to find a way to make that happen. It's a lot like Miami with Julian Sayin. That I felt Miami's winning this game when that pick six happened. I know it was early, but it was 14 points, and Sayin has not been through this rodeo before, and it's going to be similar with Mendoza. If he throws a pick six and the game is close, that's going to feel pretty seismic to me. And so can Alabama get that big mistake from Mendoza? But the contrary point is, if the teams are equal in terms of mistakes, in terms of penalties, in terms of failures, Indiana wins. Alabama has to be plus in terms of turnovers, in terms of the penalty differential, in terms of mistakes. Indiana has to make more mistakes, I think, for Alabama to win this game. But if Cignetti, who again, the greatest turnaround in the history of college football, what he's done these past 2 years at Indiana. He's so good at getting discipline from his players. If Indiana does not make mistakes and doesn't cede leverage to Alabama in any meaningful, fundamental way, Indiana wins that game.
Yeah, and I think for me, the decisive factor is going to be the line of scrimmage, and Indiana up front. Their front seven is formidable. Now, I think a lot of people aren't talking about Mendoza's mobility. He's the kind of quarterback that will scramble on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. He's got a very high football IQ. Reminds me a little bit in terms of intangibles to J.J. McCarthy. And I think Alabama can win this game, but to win it, Indiana is going to have to play an outlier game and not play true to form. And Alabama's going to have to play their best game. If they do that, Alabama can win. But if both teams play like they have played,
yes,
I think
exactly
wins the game. And I hate to say that, but it ruined my New Year's.
If these teams are fundamentally equal and they go along the same paths they've been traveling, Indiana wins. Yeah, Alabama is the team that has to shift the equation fundamentally in some way. No question.
Okay, and then the last thing I'll say to you after the USC TCU game, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I think we all know what's wrong with USC football at this point. But I wanted to give you the opportunity on this show because it's New Year's. I figured of all people, you deserve this opportunity to be the first person in the United States to announce that Jen Cohen should be fired as USC's athletic director. What do you think?
Jen Cohen should be fired if she doesn't fire Lincoln Riley following a non-playoff season this year. How about that, Adam?
That's a fair compromise. So
there we go. Meeting in the middle, baby. Yeah.
That's what it's all about, right? Thanks, Matt. Happy New Year. Great
Happy New Year. Good luck to your Tide.
All right. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay. All right, folks. So We've gone an hour 45 minutes, even without super chats. So I definitely have to close it down unless anyone wants to drop $100 right now. But it's been great to carry this conversation deep into the night. And I see it's just about midnight in the Central Time Zone. So that's Chicago, the rest of the Midwest. So Happy New Year to everybody in that region, and 1 hour away from the Mountain Time Zone, and then, of course, the Pacific Time Zone. So New Year's Day, the Orange Bowl, Oregon and Texas Tech at noon Eastern, and then the Rose Bowl, Alabama, Indiana at 4, Sugar Bowl at 8. But really, we all know that the granddaddy is really the centerpiece of this playoff quarterfinal triple header, and Oregon, Texas Tech is really the mystery game. What are those two teams going to bring to the table? It's going to be really fun. So like, subscribe, share. The main Voice of College Football channel, Mark Rogers, is going to be in this seat hosting the show after the other playoff quarterfinal games are going on. So be sure to tune in to him. Follow our various team-specific network shows. We have an Indiana show, we have an Alabama show, we have a Miami show, we have an Ohio State show, on and on and on. Follow the various team shows as we make sense of these very intriguing playoff quarterfinals. You know, Miami, Ohio State, certainly an interesting game, a close game, and a result that most people were not expecting. So how many surprises do we have in front of us on the New Year's Day playoff quarterfinals? Be sure to go to vocfb.com/shop. So you get the VOCFB label, and then you can get your own team name on these pieces of clothing, caps, shirts, also coffee mugs, tumblers. And if you get a VOCFB piece of merchandise with your school on it, it supports that school's channel as part of the Voice of College Football Network. And also consider being a member of the various team channels. For example, USC, there's a tiered structure. If you join as a member, you get access to certain insider videos as well. So plenty of ways to support the team channels as well as the Voice of College Football. From Mark Rogers, Jackson Johnson, all the other people behind the scenes here at the Voice of College Football, a very happy New Year to you and yours. Let's enjoy some New Year's Day football with the playoff quarterfinals. Good night. Happy 2026. Mark Rogers will be seeing you